short time in God's Word. Today, October 17th, we're looking at Job 1 and 2 and Acts 6 and 7. We're going to go to the book of Job. Likely familiar, I get that, and yet we want to keep going through God's Word, and even if there's parts where we go over again and think, oh, I've read that, be open to, and this just goes for year in, year out, week in, week out, because sometimes we think, well, I've studied this, so I'm good, and I know it. And let me tell you, having been doing regular teaching, for 15 plus years now here in Port Angeles, along with some teaching elsewhere, that's not true at all. Why? Even though I've taught some of these books multiple times, God's still speaking each time. I'm still learning and growing. I'm not who I was when I taught it last. The recipients are not the same people. And then what God's been doing in the intern period, and so then how I read it and how I study it, the meaning stays the same. Application might change, things I might emphasize, right? And so that's true corporately like that, and then it's also true individually. And so never get a kind of ho-hum attitude to even familiar things like, say, the book of Job, which we're very familiar with the beginning and maybe the end, and not so much going through with all the friends speaking, because it's kind of tedious a little bit at times, and we're like, what's the deal with that? But stick with it. So here in chapter 1, right, we get introduced to Job. He was blameless and upright. He feared God. He turned away from evil. That's pretty good, right? Like, if that could be said of you or me, I would take it. And so he's got listing all of his family and all his possessions. And then notice here, before the scene shifts to heaven, what Job would do. Verse 5. The days of the feast had run their course. That was feasting that his children would do. Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. What was he doing? He was praying he was looking out for his kids. And as a parent, one of the biggest things that we can do is pray desperately, regularly, continually for our children. So then the scene shifts to heaven. It says there's a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? He already knew. From going to and fro on the earth and walking up and down. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him. Blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. Satan answered the Lord and said, well, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. Stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And so what happens? All his children die. All his servants killed. All his children die. Verse 20, then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. It may be one of the most remarkable verses in the Bible. Think of your worst day and magnify that. And then think about, in such grief and sorrow, you're just so broken, you're going to worship. Why? Got no one else, got nowhere else to go. And what I found, and not in anything near like Job or many of the crazy things that have gone on in people's lives, is just if I'm not doing well, in my head, and kind of trapped in my own thoughts, if you will. And what breaks out of that, what breaks me out of that is worship and confession. And so he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Of course, there's a song a number of years ago that we would sing, blessed be the name of the Lord. He gives, he takes away. And it says, in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Well, again, chapter 2 gets into his health, and you would think at that point he's going to give up on God, and he does not. And his wife says you should curse God and die, and he's like, no. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In this, Job not sinned with his lips. Right? He wasn't going to throw God under the bus. And that's what we want to do. Why? Because he's not fixing it. And even if we understand that he's allowed it, then we're angry that he's allowed it. And so how do we process difficult things and suffering? And Job becomes a book that's very helpful in that regard if you pair it along with the Psalms, because the Psalms will take all your feelings and emotions and you can pour it out to the Lord. And the book of Job, we see this battle that goes on with people who want to tell you what's right and what you should do and what you're not doing. And with Job trying to work through his feelings and eventually how God kind of swoops in and goes, all right, here it is. And so be attentive as you read through Job in these coming days. Allow God to speak to you. Till next time, keep growing little by little.